for the touch of your lips, dear, but much more for the touch of your whips, dear. You can raise welts like nobody else as we dance to the masochism tango.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Hourgasm. This is the podcast where we talk about decolonizing sexuality and gender. I am Lindsay G. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns.
I am Lenny Peppers. I use she, her, hers pronouns.
I'm Jenny Williamson. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Okay, everybody, we're really excited this week because we have a guest on. As she just said, her name is Jenny Williamson, and she is the co-host of Ancient History Fangirl, which we are going to get into in a little bit. But first, we have some words from our co-host, Lenny.
Yes. I just wanted to say that in this podcast, we use the heteronormative terms of gender binary of men and women under the understanding that there are agender, androgynous, bigender, pangender, and gender fluid norms that exist outside of cisnormativity. While we tend to use the male and female as shorthand, this is not meant to undermine the very serious role of colonization in violence against two-spirit and non-conforming individuals. Even more so, this is not meant to obscure the reality that two-spirit and non-conforming people are the most likely to experience sexual violence, as we have mentioned in earlier episodes. We do not believe in the gender binary without fluidity, which is a Euro-Western construct that forced a strict gender division on our societies, which in itself is a form of violence.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Thank you, Lenny. So, bringing it back to Eurocentric constructs, let's talk a little bit about Jenny's podcast, Ancient History Fangirl. I just want to say, I have been listening for the past 3 years, and I freaking love your show.
Thank you.
I think there's a lot of overlap between what we do on Hourgasm and what you guys have been doing for a while now, which is, one reason, obviously, that we wanted to have you on the show. So, Jenny, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about Ancient History Fangirl?
Yeah, so I actually do want to say how much overlap there is, because I listened to your episode on femininity the other day, and I was just like, it was so fun because I was just listening to it and thinking like, oh, I have thoughts. Oh my God, this goes back to ancient Rome. Oh my God. So I'm so glad that you both invited me onto the show and I get to talk to you both. This is really exciting for me. My podcast is called Ancient History Fangirl. It's been going on for about 2 years now. It is, basically our tagline is true stories and tall tales from the ancient world. We talk about things like, we talk about mythology, but we also talk about, people in history and, personalities in history. We try to focus on women when we can, but even when we're focusing on male people in ancient history, we are we are trying to focus on, kind of put a feminist lens on it. Mm-hmm. So, the time period that we have been focusing on is pretty Greco-Roman, and that wasn't really our intention when we started, which is why we're Ancient History Fangirl and not like Ancient Greek and Roman History Fangirl. It just kind of turned out that we didn't really know what we were doing when we started, and we just fell into this really deep rabbit hole, and we haven't been able to claw our way out yet because we just keep finding things that are based on prior research and keep going in different directions and digging our way to the moon or whatever it is we're doing. So we want to get out of Greco-Roman history, and we're trying to figure out how to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, but in the meantime, I do think that the work that we've been doing is valuable to an extent, because I kind of feel like I'm mucking around in the basement of the patriarchy. So I do think that I have probably some relevant stuff to say that overlaps with your podcast a lot, just based on what I've listened to so far. And I also want to preface everything I'm going to say with, I am in absolutely no way qualified to talk about this stuff. I am not a historian. I do not have any advanced degrees in this topic. I have a podcast, and I read a lot, and I watch a lot of documentaries. So there probably are going to be historians who are listening out there who might have different opinions on stuff that I think. So.
I hope that there aren't a lot of historians listening to our podcast, because I say a lot of half-cocked bullshit on this podcast.
Oh, right.
Like, every episode.
Yeah, that's coming. That's great. That's the overlap.
Yeah, that's where we come together.
Half-cocked bullshit. That is my specialty.
I mean, to be fair, though, you have done a lot of reading and research for your podcast and just out of your own interest. Like, you certainly know more about the ancient world, especially when it comes to Rome, than I do. I feel like, I guess I can't speak for Lenny. Lenny, you know a lot of stuff, so.
Oh, well, I think that, advanced degrees are colonial institution, and that I do most of my research on my own anyway, and so it's essentially the same thing.
Perfect.
Yeah, fair point.
I mean, there isn't really very many people in Montana right now studying tribal critical race theory. And so I pretty much buy all my materials, I study everything on my own, and then I just have an occasional, historian be like, all right, back it up a little bit here. I just have a historian check me every once in a while. And
yeah, same. We have a lot. It's kind of scary. Like, we have a lot of people who are archaeologists and classicists and historians who are on Twitter listening to our podcast and occasionally tweeting things at us. And it's just like, oh, I have to actually care about whether I get this right. Oh, no.
Yeah, I both look forward to and dread that day for Hourgasm, because I definitely do just say some shit sometimes. A lot of the time, though, it's great because Lenny actually researches things, and she will either be like, "You're actually onto something, Lindsay," or "Actually,"
Yeah.
which I appreciate very much coming from Lenny, not so much from mansplainers. But yeah, as far as overlap goes, I think that one of the things that really made me think that this would be a good connection is that you and Jen really focus on women's stories and how the behavior of the men, even in stories that are, very much about men, how that behavior is ridiculous and often
Yes.
disgusting.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a man-shamey way, oh, cut your toenails. I mean, they were marrying 65-year-old men off to 14-year-old girls, and how that's not cool. We don't do that. And really just calling that out. I remember there was a series of episodes that you did where you kept having to refer to this group of men in ancient Rome as the best men.
Ugh.
And
Yep.
yeah, and every time that either of you said that phrase, you'd both go, ugh. And I just thought it was such a great, recurring joke. So I think we're very much on the same page here.
Yeah, so the best men were the conservative faction in the Senate around the time of Julius Caesar.
Oh.
Yeah, the Optimates, I believe, was the word, I think. It's something in Latin. I think it was the Optimates. Yeah.
So were the best men into Caesar or not liking Caesar? Was he considered conservative?
No, he was a populari, which was a populist. So he was the opposite. Yeah.
Interesting.
Not to say that populism is necessarily conservative or progressive. I mean, there's definitely strains of both. But I think for his time, I don't know that I would even call Julius Caesar progressive. I don't know that I would put that name on him. He was a populist, which meant that he drew his power from people who were not the rich and powerful.
Right.
But it's kind of hard to apply our sense of things politically to their sense of things in certain ways, and then sometimes it's weirdly applicable.
Yeah. Yeah, I always got the impression that Caesar was very much a popularity-ist. He just wanted everybody to like him.
Yes, that, and directly bribing people with big parties and gladiatorial fights and stuff. Yeah, throwing money at it.
Sounds familiar. Sounds like someone who's been powerful here recently. What was his name?
I forgot that name.
I don't know.
I forgot that face.
I have no idea.
Stricken that name from the records.
I dig it.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. I have to clear my throat for a second. Man, I had one phone call earlier today, and now I'm like all scratchy in the throat. Okay, where were we? Okay, so I think the sort of through line that we were really seeing between Ancient History Fangirl and Hourgasm is basically Rome was the colonizing force in Europe and Northern Africa for a really long time. And I am very fuzzy on this. Like I said, I say a lot of half-cocked shit. But my understanding is that, you know, the forces of Rome colonized Europe and Northern Africa. And then even after the Roman Empire fell, that sort of the same brand of control was applied to those areas via the Catholic Church, which eventually was all exported by way of imperialism to the Americas and now pretty much the entire world. And so a lot of the time when I'm listening to your podcast, I'm thinking about, like, what sounds familiar to me. And I wanted to have you on to talk about the gender roles and, you know, the ways that people saw sexuality in ancient Rome so that we could kind of see if there's any actual through lines that feel familiar and feel like they may have come down to us today.
Well, I think that you guys are going to be possibly pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised or not surprised. I'm not sure if this will surprise you, but I would say that yes, there are a lot. Yes. There are a lot of those.
Score.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that what you said about colonization is absolutely true about ancient Rome. Like, the way that I've come to see it, especially like since we've been kind of branching out from Rome itself and talking about how it colonized different cultures. We talked about Egypt on one of our arcs, and now we're talking about we talked about Gaul. We're talking about Britain now and Scotland. Is just how ancient Rome 2,000 years ago visited this trauma on these ancient cultures. And then those ancient cultures, specifically Britain, took that trauma, magnified it, and blew it up throughout the rest of the world over millennia. So, and that's not to say that other cultures did not colonize, because they certainly did, but I think that our global form of colonization stemming from Europe today can be traced back to ancient Rome in a lot of ways.
Yes, I'm so right. Awesome.
Yeah, like I really do see a lot of similarities. And like I said, like, we want to be a podcast about all of ancient history, but we've really only studied this one area of history so far. So there might be a lot that I'm missing there. I might be leaving some things out. But this is what I'm getting the sense of as I go.
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
I want to hear all about it. So let's just dig in. Like, what can you tell us about kind of the broad strokes-ish of gender roles in ancient Rome? Like, how did they work?
Well, I think that gender roles, I'm really glad that we're talking about this as one small facet of that. So how deep in the weeds do you want to get? Because I can talk about women's roles in terms of the legal sense of things, or I can talk about the founding myths of Rome and what those tell us about women's roles and the messages women got, you know, from childhood growing up. I don't know where we start.
I don't know. Lenny, do you have a preference?
I'm kind of interested in the second part of that, actually.
Yeah?
The mythology? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The mythology. Okay, so this is going to get into some dark stuff. I just should mention ahead of time that it talks about rape and suicide. I don't know if you guys give, like, content warnings for that.
No.
The whole thing, the whole thing has a content warning on it, because we talk a lot about murdered and missing Indigenous women and, you know, things like that in this show. So,
okay, yeah. Then in that case, that's probably good. Okay, so there are two founding myths that I want to talk about. Ancient Rome had a lot of founding myths, and two of them always really stood out to me as sending a message down through time to all of the women and girls in ancient Rome. Like, this is how you behave. This is how to be a woman. And they're very, very dark. So one of them is called The Rape of the Sabine Women.
Right.
It's one of the very earliest founding myths of Rome. And it's when the founders, Romulus and Remus, gathered